everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Every leader has a journey, and that's different. So, here we are at the Leaders Speak, learning from the leaders. And not all entrepreneurs' days are similar. Everyone's viewpoint of how they use their day is unique. And today we have a very special person with us from whom I have learned a lot. She means a lot to me, and she needs no introduction. It's none other than Tanya Janca.
Hi, Vandana. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me and agreeing to be on the podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Oh my gosh, pleasure's all mine.
Tanya, we know bits and pieces about your journey in cybersecurity industry and in IT, but we want to know how you came up with the idea of We Hack Purple, how you started with all, and what are the things that you have planned for We Hack Purple?
Okay, so that is a lot. So when I started We Hack Purple, it was a little bit of an accident. So I had started another startup company and we were making a product in 2019, and then we exploded, which a lot of startups do because, like the founders, we just had different visions and we decided we would separate. And then I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. So I did what any internet nerd would do. I asked on Twitter, what do you think I should do? And then I kind of opened up my Zoom calendar and just let people book time and just met with tons of people that I follow or who follow me. And person after person after person said, could you start a training company? Because I would like to be able to take all your training. I saw you speak at this conference. I'd really like lessons, or I'd like this or that. And so I said, okay. So at first I started writing more blogs than before and started charging a tiny bit of money for people to get all the blogs instead of just some. And that immediately started earning enough income to support me, which was great. But then I wanted to make like formal courses that people could follow. And I wanted to make it so that I guess people could learn enough to go and do a job. Does that make sense? So someone that is a software developer and they want to become an application security professional, like a junior person, but have this foundation and they know what they're doing. So I made kind of like a minimal viable product, if that makes sense. So uh, I hired a guy part-time to edit my videos and we just smashed together an online course, and we sold enough of that I was like, okay, so there is a market for this. And the feedback is we need to improve like the quality of the video, the sound, the lighting, but that the content was good. So then I studied how to make online courses and a bit about adult education and how people learn. So then we re-recorded and added a ton to it and made an entire program, and that started selling. And yeah, it turns out that working from home is awesome. It turns out that I love building courses and content, which I already knew. Turns out there is a market for it, which is great. And it turns out that, so like a big problem with companies is scaling, especially if you're one person. So I have a team now and there are 5 of us, including me. And this sounds weird. So there's small businesses and there's startups. So me speaking at different conferences, that's a small business, right? Even if there's 5 of us, that's still a small business. We can only scale as many places as we can speak at, right? But the We Hack Purple business of selling on-demand courses and having like our supportive community, etc., we can sell as many copies of that course as we want. Like I can wake up and people have purchased the course in different areas of the world, probably where they're awake. And that is where you are able to scale exponentially. That is the difference between a startup company versus a small business. And so it sounds weird, but it didn't occur to me to do the small business stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, small business stuff makes money. And we can like sort of do a combination of this live training, which is sort of like consulting, but then still have this huge exponential growth. And something I would have never considered is that people call and then they just do a cost benefit analysis. So they're like, I have I have this many software developers that I want to take your secure coding training. You know, you charge this much per day if you do it live, but as many students as we want, versus, you know, if we're going to send them through your, buy like a bulk purchase of the on-demand course, what's the price difference?
I also do want to know, how do you start your day? Like, how does your day look like when you work on different aspects of your organization or the venture that you have right now? Because there's so much energy, there's so much time that you have to give into
Yeah.
the content, to the team, to the trainings, and then online portal, and so much more. So, how do you balance out everything?
So I use a calendar a lot to block time. And for instance, so let's say I have like a certain number of things I'm supposed to do in a week. I will look at my calendar and then like block off calendar time to make sure that I work on those things. But then, so I have an administrative assistant. She's aware that like she can move those things if she needs to. And so I'll finish a meeting and I'll see, okay, so for the next 2 hours you're supposed to work on this. So I'll like finish the notes or whatever. You know, like usually when you have a meeting, there's like a thing you're supposed to do. So I do the thing and then I'm like, okay, so I have like an hour and a half left to do this. And then I try to do the thing. Sometimes I'm just like, I'm tired, you know, that meeting or whatever I was doing was exhausting. And then I just go into my farm. So I have a small hobby farm and I go and I like prune my tomatoes, or I will plant things or pick things or weed or whatever. And it sounds silly, but it's, for me, that is like instant stress relief. Sometimes I will do enough that I work out like a big sweat, which is totally fine because I work from home and people in Zoom meetings cannot smell you. um, and and then I'll just go back to whatever my next meeting is or what I was supposed to be doing, and then I might do that work the next day or in the evening. But having the ability to just like step outside and essentially forest bathe. Have you heard of the concept of forest bathing?
No.
Okay, so the term came from Japan, and the idea is that if you're very stressed, you step out into nature, and it naturally lowers our cortisol levels. And touching the
Huh.
earth specifically will naturally lower your cortisol levels.
Yeah.
I, again, am not sure if I answered. Oh, so you were saying a day of. So a day of, so um, I have kind of a rule that I don't start my meetings before 9 a.m. unless it's an international conference talk or someone is paying me thousands of dollars that it's worth it. So generally, I don't start until 9. And quite often, like one day per week, there's a day where I don't have like an early meeting. And then that's my just wake up when my body wants to day, if that makes sense. I think a lot of people who work in like a corporate type of environment aren't able to just sleep in sometimes if their body wants to. So I was like, it's really important that if like I need extra sleep, I'm able to get it at some point. And then, yeah, I usually have like a couple of meetings per day. I have 1 or 2 deep work days per day where no one's allowed booking any meetings with me, and all I do is just produce content. Or having a day where all you do is deep work is really, I don't know about you, but for me, it's very pleasurable. Like not having a ton of interruptions, not having to like switch context a bunch of times. It's just, I'm working on this course and all I'm doing is like making slides or writing articles, or I'm just going to record videos for 3 hours straight. And then, you know, I'm going to go through and cut edits or whatever it is that I'm going to do. I suggest that if people have the flexibility to have a day with no meetings. But yeah, I have a lot of meetings. I have a lot of meetings. I had an amazing salesperson, and he left us because he took our training course and is now an AppSec engineer. Um, we're still friends though. We were actually talking yesterday. But so then I've had to do sales since then. And he's like, you're really good at sales, Tanya. I'm like, no, I'm not. But it turns out he is right. Because I just talk about the courses and like how I'm excited and how I actually genuinely think it'll help. But I guess I had viewed sales not as problem solving and like helping this person get what they need. I'd viewed it
Mhm.
as like you're supposed to try to make them buy stuff. But it turns out that like if people call me, they already want to buy something and they're just like, can you just help me solve this problem? And then I'm just really honest as to if we can or we can't. And then they just buy or they don't. And I'm like, oh, this is not uncomfortable at all. I'm just like honest and real with them. And that actually is totally not painful. This is gonna sound weird, Vandana, but like there's a lot of things that I've learned in running a company where I see you don't have to do it the way other companies do it. So for instance, like marketing and sales. So there's interesting business decisions you have to make where you have to like in our company, we have like a list of values. And whenever there's a question, if we're not sure, I'm like, look at the values. Do you feel uncomfortable because maybe you're
Right.
going to break one of our values? And they're like, oh, I'm like, don't do it. That's just it. Just
Right.
don't do it. If we lose a sale, it doesn't matter. But we have a bunch of values. So in my hope, it makes employees feel more comfortable working somewhere because I don't want to work at a place where it's my job to lie to people or trick them, right? Like that's
Right.
uncomfortable for me. And I have to say that's probably uncomfortable for a large percentage of people, right? And so, like, assuming we don't employ anyone where they greatly disagree with those values, because then they're probably not going to like working at We Hack Purple. If they're like, accessibility sucks, too bad, so sad, it's like, well, you're really not going to like working here. um, yeah, and so when employees sign to work for us, it's actually the values are actually like part of the contract, and like it's actually part of like the interview system as well. Like because I wanted, so I got this really amazing advice from someone from Contrast Security, and we were having coffee one day, and he said, Tanya, when I started this company, I made one rule for hiring people, and I only wanted to hire people that were nice, like people that were kind, people that like he's like it sounds so silly, but like I can train someone on technical skills, I can train someone to be better at persuasion and selling, but you can't train someone to be a nice and kind individual. They're like that or they're not. And he's like, and this was 2 years ago when he said it to me, but at the time he's like, it's been 7 years and I love working at my company because everyone is kind and nice. And we all always treat each other with that kindness. And he's like, it's the best decision ever. And sometimes I've interviewed people and thought, wow, that person's brilliant. And like, they are amazing, but they also like cut throats like and like push other people out of the way and stand on their faces like to get that success. And it's like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to pass. And he's like, if I can offer you one advice, it's make sure that you hire people who are kind. And gosh, that was good advice. Oh yeah. Janca,
Yeah.
if you're listening, thank you.
Yeah. So I was just going to ask you that if you can share some of the advices for the people who are trying to set up maybe small business, maybe startups, or maybe going to start their ideas or ventures. So what would be those some advices?
Okay, so one advice is you want to have, so you must solve a problem. So if you are trying to create a super cool technology that's amazing, that doesn't matter. It matters if you are solving a real problem that is worth solving, that people are willing to pay money to solve. So if you're not doing that, you're not going to go anywhere. And then second, try to, so this is a thing I struggle with. Try to stay on the ball and not get distracted and say yes to lots of other things. So people are always trying to hire me for other things. And sometimes if your business is not making very much money, you're like, oh, well, it would be nice to have that $5,000, so I will do this thing. But it takes you off your track, and so you don't make more money for longer because you've been sidetracked with these other things. I would say definitely think about what values are important to you and interview with that in mind and realize that you can train people on a lot of technical skills. You can train people on a lot of like different job skills, but you can't change a person and how they are. And so I hire a lot on potential. And mostly that's worked out really well. Um, Treat your team how you want to be treated, and you will get a lot of positive surprises in response. Um, Try not to be a bottleneck because that's obvious, but work out systems as much as you can to avoid that. And also check in with your customers regularly to make sure that you are solving their problem and that they are satisfied. And like we've gotten lots of feedback where it's like, yeah, I loved the course, but you know what would make it way cooler? And then obviously I want to add that. Or yeah, there was, I loved the course, but there was this small mistake. I'm like, oh, thank you. And, obviously you go fix the mistake or you improve the thing or whatever it is. Like, you talked about this. It would be so cool if you like had a diagram or whatever, right? But checking in with them just to make sure they're okay, to make sure they're satisfied, because all the selling and marketing and all the stuff that you do doesn't matter if you're creating a product that only kind of somewhat satisfies your customers. And if you can delight them, that's like a word specifically that people use a lot in DevOps and startup land. Like you want to delight your customers. I know that some companies say they're customers obsessed. I like I don't know if you need to say that, but I think that sometimes companies forget that like there's a human on the other side of your application or your system or your course or whatever consuming this, and you want to make sure they're okay. You want to make sure that they're satisfied, not so that you can say like, oh, like our customers give us 5 out of 5, like testimonials and telling other people is good, but you checking in with them and making sure things are okay as part of like that person recommending it to a friend or not. It's part of that person buying your next course or your next product or resubscribing or not. And those people are the smartest. Like those people are the best people to give you feedback. Does that make sense? Like if you have a quality assurance team, that's nice. But the people who are willing to take money, their own money, and give it to you for your product, these are the people whose opinions matter the absolute most. And sometimes I have seen people who run companies say, well, they're using it wrong, or like, that customer's stupid. And I'm like, there's going to be some people out there where their opinions are pretty wacky. Like they're like, well, I think all of your courses should be free, Tanya. And I'm like, well, I appreciate that you don't understand how capitalism works and that I'm unable to do that and remain in business with the current model that we have. So thanks for your feedback, but I can't do that. But most of them, if you can get them to share with you, it's very valuable information. Yeah.
Great. Such wonderful advices. I am sure everyone is going to love it. Everyone is going to take so much from it. And as always, I'm always in awe of the things that you do.
Oh, thank you, Vandana, so much for having me. And it was so nice to see you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. It was such a pleasure to have you, Tanya.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.